But then you're stuck. It's rolling.
Good afternoon. I call the hearing to order. Mr. Attorney General, welcome to the committee on Commerce, Justice, Science, Appropriations Subcommittee, and we're here to examine the Department of Justice's fiscal year 2019 budget request. I'm pleased to welcome you to this subcommittee. My colleagues and I are very much interested in hearing from you and hearing your testimony, considering your testimony today. Your input is not only helpful but necessary as we review the President's spending priorities for the Justice Department. While this hearing is about the Department's FY 2019 budget request, I would suspect that you will hear about a number of other issues unrelated to the Department's resource and funding needs. My focus in this hearing is to better understand your top funding priorities and to emphasize those that are important to our nation. The Department of Justice is responsible for and involved in many important national priorities. Arguably, the greatest responsibility includes keeping Americans safe, which carries a new meaning given the growing national security threats of today, and upholding the rule of law. This requires that Congress adequately fund our nation's law enforcement efforts, including counterterrorism and cybersecurity initiatives. In Kansas, the Department recently successfully investigated and convicted individuals who conspired to bomb residents of Somali immigrants to our state. The work done by the FBI, by the liberal Kansas Police Department, the Seward County Sheriff's Office, the Ford County Sheriff's Office, the Garden City Police Department, the Dodge City Police Department, and the Finney County Sheriff's Office, along with the Kansas Highway Patrol and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and the United States Attorney's Office should, in my mind, be a model for federal and local partnerships. I trust the Department will seek to replicate the successes of these entities with the funds in this request. The President's FY 2019 budget proposal of $28.4 billion for the Department of Justice. I note that, however, I note that the many agencies and departments, this budget request was created and produced before the recently enacted fiscal year 2018 bill, which was finalized and has recently become law. For example, both Fix NICS Act and the Stop School Violence Act authorized important safety initiatives, but were signed into law in the 2018 omnibus after your FY19 budget submission. As a co-sponsor of both pieces of legislation, I look forward to hearing the Department's plan to implement these two important policies. Furthermore, this administration has made it a priority to combat violent crime, which is reflected as one of the Department's highest priorities. Specifically, the administration seeks $109.2 million to enhance ongoing efforts to reduce violent crime and to combat transnational criminal organizations in the FY19 budget request. For example, the Department requested increased funding to expand the Project Safe Neighborhood initiative. Project Safe Neighborhood's main focus is the eradication of illegal firearms and violent gang activity. The program is designed to improve police and community relations, which is strongly supported by many from law enforcement officials in my state of Kansas. The subcommittee looks forward to hearing more details about this program. I also look forward to hearing about the impact of emerging technologies, such as those being utilized by the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, known as NIBIN. NIBIN allows law enforcement officials to share ballistic intelligence across the United States, making law enforcement resources more efficient and effective. The Department and administration have also prioritized solving the problem of illegal immigration. The FY19 request seeks $65.9 million in immigration-related programs, program enhancements to support border security and enforcement efforts. For example, the 2019 request outlines that this funding would hire 150 attorneys for the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which oversees the nation's immigration courts and the Board of Immigration Appeals, and provide $25 million for technology improvements to transform current paper operating system to an electronic filing system. The Department is also involved in helping to combat ongoing opioid epidemic. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, opioid overdoses in the U.S. have surpassed motor vehicle accidents as the #1 cause of accidental death in the country. The crisis needs to be aggressively addressed, and I look forward to working with the Department to ensure adequate resources are provided to do just that. Lastly, Mr. Attorney General, I want to thank you for your attention and acknowledgement of a letter that Senator Shaheen and I sent to you exactly 1 week ago regarding the Executive Office of Immigration Review, Legal Orientation, and Immigration Help Desk programs. We also spoke on the phone earlier this week, and I'd appreciate it if you would address this matter in more detail in this hearing. I know that you would agree that ensuring that congressional direction is followed is extremely important. Again, I thank you for your service as our Attorney General and the important testimony that we will hear from you today as our subcommittee begins its work on the FY 2019 budget for the Department of Justice. I now recognize the Senator from New Hampshire, Senator Shaheen, the ranking member.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is our first hearing together, so I look forward to working with you on this subcommittee. And I'm very pleased that the Attorney General Sessions is here with us this afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking time to speak with me last week on the phone. I want to begin by thanking the 115,000 career employees of the Department of Justice. They are working hard every day to keep Americans safe from crime and terrorism. And the breadth of issues that the department handles on a daily basis is vast. I do have a concern that as I look at the budget proposal for fiscal year 2019, the department has requested addressing these missions with less funding, a reduction of $1.9 billion, which is 6.2% less than the level provided in the omnibus we passed last month. Now, while I was very pleased to see the funding levels preserved for life-saving grant programs under the Office of Violence Against Women, I'm concerned about some of those drastic reductions and eliminations that have been proposed for other programs. As you know very well, the Justice Department is on the front lines fighting the deadly, uncontrolled opioid epidemic. As Senator Moran said, and as every member of this subcommittee knows, this is an epidemic that we have seen across this country. It's an epidemic that is still gaining strength. And I just came from a group of family members from the Addiction Policy Forum who are here to advocate, who talked about the challenges that they face. And they reminded me that we lost, as Senator Moran said, about 63,000 Americans last year to the opioid epidemic. And for every one of those people lost, they have a family who is suffering and is experiencing that loss. So I certainly support enforcement and prosecution efforts, but I believe they should be paired with prevention and treatment responses as well. This balanced approach is something that I've heard from police chiefs, from judges, and from other criminal justice professionals in New Hampshire. The critical need to help children and families grappling with the opioid crisis in their neighborhoods and within their own families is very real, and even the DEA has focused on a comprehensive approach to opioids with their threefold 360 strategy that targets enforcement, diversion control, and community outreach. Manchester, New Hampshire, which is our largest city, and I know as Attorney General you've already been there, and we appreciate that. It was one of the first locations chosen for the 360 program, and the DEA has seen real success there, not only in tackling heroin and opioid trafficking, but by partnering with social service and other community groups like the Boys and Girls Clubs of Manchester to provide that prevention and education programs for young people that are so critical. New Hampshire has also been grappling with the dramatic rise of fentanyl, the synthetic opioid that's approximately 50 times more potent than heroin, 100 times more powerful than morphine, and unfortunately, New Hampshire leads this nation in overdose deaths from fentanyl. Sadly, it's now spreading across the country, and it's something that has overwhelmed state crime labs, already backlogged with testing crime scene evidence. We provided a total of $447 million for justice grant programs, $299 million more than we provided in the FY17 budget, to help communities respond to the opioid crisis with a balance of enforcement, treatment, and prevention programs. So I'm interested to hear how the department plans to expand these programs and what your FY19 budget request will do. I'm concerned that right now it calls for eliminating key programs like the COPS anti-heroin task forces, which we funded at $32 million. It calls for dramatic cuts in programs like the Coverdell program, which we talked about, and I know it's something that you care a lot about because you authored that legislation. I'm also concerned about the continued hold on the FY 2017 Burn JAG awards to our states. This program is the backbone for helping states and local law enforcement with crime prevention efforts across the country, and I know that my police chiefs in New Hampshire are very frustrated waiting to receive funding that they had expected months ago. According to the police chief in Manchester, Nick Willard, a city that responded to 800 overdose calls last year, he now has fewer police officers on the street conducting drug operations without their Burn JAG funding. I know you would agree that getting these grant awards to law enforcement for programs like this is critically important. Now, when we spoke last week, you indicated that once a decision was reached in the pending Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals case, that the Justice Department would release Burn JAG funding for 2017. The court did issue its decision on April 19th, so I'm interested to know when these awards will be released, and I'm concerned when I see that the Justice Department has filed yet another motion on Monday evening that will further delay these awards. So, Mr. Attorney General, thank you again for being here. I look forward to your testimony and to our discussion today.
Senator Shaheen, thank you very much. In the newness of the moment of actually having the gavel in my hand, I failed to acknowledge my desire to work very closely with you and to make certain that this subcommittee does its work in a timely, in a bipartisan way. I would tell you that the previous subcommittees that I've chaired, both of those bills have passed through the full committee with unanimous vote, and I look forward to seeing if we can accomplish that in this arena as well. I also would say that I have a high priority of making certain that all 12 appropriation bills that our full appropriations committee will address march their way across the Senate floor, approved by the House and signed by the President. I want the appropriations process to work, and I pledge to you to do everything I can to accomplish that goal. In that regard, I'm honored to recognize the chairman of the full committee, who has stated on so many occasions this committee is going to do its work, and I look forward to not only hearing Senator Shelby's remarks today, but in particular working with him to make sure that we accomplish our goals in this subcommittee. The senator from Alabama, the chairman of the committee, is recognized.
Thank you, Senator Moran. I will be brief. I just want to welcome my former colleague, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, to this appropriation hearing. We will be working with the Justice Department to help fund the requisite programs. Of course, that includes the FBI. Because it has to be done, and I hope under Chairman Rand and Ranking Member Shaheen that we can move this bill to the floor as fast as possible and not go from crisis to crisis, with some certainty. With that, I'm going to have a number of questions, but I'd like to do them for the record, and I would ask my unanimous consent that my opening statement be made part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection. So ordered. I now have the honor of recognizing the ranking member of the full committee, the senator from Vermont, Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to hear what you said about regular order. Senator Shelby and I have been working closely on that. We had a long meeting, the two of us, with the Republican and Democratic leaders last night, and plotting out ways to get most of the bills done within the fiscal year. Attorney General Sessions, welcome. Finally, we have you in the Appropriations Committee. I'm sorry it's only the first appearance here in 16 months because we have to make appropriations. And then we have to ask, after we make appropriations, how the funds are expended. And in my years on this committee, and I think this could be said by members of both sides of the aisle, we consider the oversight operations of this committee very important, and the operations of your department, there is an urgent need for oversight. Now, let me begin with one thing. While you and I may disagree on many policies, I've known you long enough to know that there's one area where you and I are in total agreement, and that is that we care deeply about the integrity of the Justice Department. You and I have felt that way whether we've had a Republican or a Democratic president. We have both stated so many times in the Judiciary Committee our concern about the integrity of the Justice Department. And I worry that the walls intended to protect the independence and credibility are at the risk of crumbling. I am very concerned how the president's relentless and I think baseless attacks on senior DOJ and FBI leadership, including attacking you for your recusal from the Russian investigation, something you were required to do. You just followed the law and you did the right thing. That's simply without precedent, and I believe it's wrong. We've also learned that the president wanted to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller last year. The president's allies are now going on television, apparently at the direction of the White House, to build a case for firing your second in command, Rod Rosenstein. Some in the Congress have, I think, irresponsibly even talked about impeaching Rod Rosenstein. Now, I've been here 44 years. I've never seen such attacks, and again, against people in Democratic or a Republican administration. I worry that they're being done to interfere with your department, the Department of Justice, a place that you and I have always tried to protect, their ability to complete an investigation into how and with whom Russia attacked our democracy. You're at the helm of a Justice Department under siege. This is your chance to talk with us about how you're going to protect it. And in that regard, don't let the Justice Department turn its back on a proud tradition of being a guardian of equal justice for all, including the most vulnerable in our society, the most disadvantaged. You have to be careful. Civil rights, voting rights, immigration. There is giving equal protection to all, including the most vulnerable in our society. So, Mr. Chairman, those are the areas I will question, because it is the Department of Justice is there for all of us, for every American. And I want to make sure that the Attorney General has the tools and the ability to do that.
Senator Leahy, thank you very much. We now will recognize our witness today. I welcome once again Attorney General Sessions to this subcommittee hearing, and I recognize you for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Moran and Ranking Member Shaheen, distinguished members of this committee, friends and former colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I'm particularly pleased to be able to congratulate my former senior senator for 20 years, Senator Shelby, for being chosen to chair this historic committee. It is a tremendous honor, Senator Shelby, and my sincere congratulations to you. And you can know for sure how much I've appreciated our good relationship for 20 years. It's been an honor of a lifetime to serve as the Attorney General of the United States and to represent the men and women of the Department of Justice. You can be sure, really sure, that I understand the importance of the office I hold, and I will strive to be worthy of it. Every single day, the 115,000 men and women of the department work to protect our national security against terrorist threats, reduce violent crime in our communities, stop deadly drug dealers and their organizations, and strengthen the rule of law. So today I'd like to lay out some of the priorities reflected in our budget request. First of all, the department has rapidly moved to improve partnerships with the 85% of law enforcement officers who serve at the state, local, and tribal levels. We know that we cannot succeed without them to make America safe. And yesterday, we were once again reminded of the sacrifice we ask of our men and women in blue. Officer Crystal Almeida and Rogerio Santander responded to a routine call at a Home Depot in Dallas, but they did not return home. And today we mourn with the family of Officer Santander and pray for the recovery of Officer Almeida. The men and women of law enforcement deserve our respect. They deserve our support. They deserve our commitment in our work to reduce crime. After 2 decades of declining crime, in 2015 and 2016, the violent crime rate went up by nearly 7%. Assaults went up 10%. Rape went up nearly 11%. Murder increased in those 2 years more than 20%. That's the largest increases since 1968. President Trump, our federal officers, our local law enforcement partners are determined that this crime rise will not continue. Our prosecutions of illicit drugs, gun violators, violent crime, gangs, opioids, and immigration offenses are going to go up too. In 2017, we brought cases against more violent criminals than any year in decades. We charged the most federal firearms prosecutions in a decade. We convicted nearly 500 human traffickers and 1,200 gang members. Your strong support, Congress's support for our work means that we can sustain our Project Safe Neighborhood program, where our United States attorneys will meet with your local community leaders and law enforcement leaders to develop crime reduction plans based on local needs. This is a program that has proven to work scientifically. It's been analyzed, and I feel great support for it when I travel around the country. Indeed, there are some good signs in the preliminary data that the increases in murder and violent crime appear to have been slowed, and violent crime may have actually begun to decrease. We also embrace the President's goal of reducing prescription drugs sold in the United States by 1/3 over the next 3 years. This is an important step in reducing addiction and overdose deaths. We are simply prescribing too many drugs in this country. This department is going after drug companies, doctors, pharmacists, and others who violate the law, and we will use civil, criminal, and sound regulatory powers to do so. I've directed that every United States Attorney's Office establish an opioid coordinator to focus on this dramatic problem. As Senator Shaheen noted, the largest cause of death for Americans under age 50 is overdose drug overdoses. That is a stunning statistic. We've got to do something about it. We've already charged hundreds of people suspected of contributing to the ongoing opioid crisis, including over 50 doctors for opioid-related crimes, some very serious criminals. 16 of these doctors prescribed more than 20.3 million pills illegally. Our organized crime drug enforcement task forces have also indicted more than 6,500 defendants in opioid-related investigations and forfeited more than $150 million. With powerful drugs like fentanyl and heroin on our streets, we are experiencing overdose deaths, the likes of which we've never seen before. This must end. We are out of time. We have to see results now, and I truly believe we can change this dynamic. Amazingly, in the last month alone, the DEA seized a total of more than 90 kilograms, 2.2 pounds per kilogram, of suspected fentanyl in cases from Detroit to New York to Boston. Fentanyl is 50 times as powerful as heroin, and it's so powerful that an amount equivalent to a pinch of salt is powerful enough to be deadly. So we must acknowledge that the vast majority of fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine first come across our southern border. It almost all is coming across the southern border. And we are working with our Department of Homeland Security partners to reduce and ultimately end illegal immigration, which will also help us to take on transnational criminal organizations and reduce the drugs pouring across the border. We're streamlining and increasing prosecutions and targeting criminal aliens. Congress has provided us, thankfully, enough funding for 100 new immigration judges in the recent omnibus, which will help us keep up with the caseload. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address one matter that I know is important to the committee, the legal orientation program. You and Senator Shaheen both raised it with me. I've reviewed the situation, and I have previously expressed some concerns about the program, and the Executive Office for Immigration Review has expressed its intent to pause 2 parts of the 5-part program pending the results of a formal review of the program. I recognize, however, that this committee has spoken on this matter, and out of deference to the committee, I've ordered that there be no pause while the review is being conducted, and I look forward to evaluating such findings as are produced, and we'll be in communication with this committee when they are available. Our explicit goal for the Department of Justice are to reduce violent crime, reduce the surging increase in homicides, reduce overdose deaths, and to reduce prescription opioids. I believe these priorities are the priorities of the American people, and I believe your priorities. So finally, let me say, with all the strength that I can muster, no nation has a finer group of law officers than those who comprise the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, and the United States Marshal Service. They are now in 24 hours a day, in every corner of America, working courageously and faithfully to protect this nation and our people. And when we face criticism, we're not going to be defensive. When questions arise, even if misplaced, we will take necessary action to establish that concerns are either not true or take strong action against any wrongdoing. This department, above all others, can never get too big for its britches or think itself in any way as above the law that we must apply to others. We know the government always wins when justice is done. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking forward to discussing these matters with you and members of the committee.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you very much. Let me first use this as an opportunity to say how wholeheartedly I agree with your assessment of the law enforcement officials at the Department of Justice and across the country, and how worthy they are of our respect and support. And I appreciate of justice and across the country, and how worthy they are of our respect and support. And I appreciate the sentiments that you expressed on their behalf. And I would assume I join all my colleagues in indicating our full faith and belief in those who work every day to protect the lives and safety of Americans here at home. So thank you for those strong words, and I commend you for them. Secondly, let me thank you for your response. As I indicated in my opening statement, Senator Shaheen and I corresponded with you in regard to the pause of the legal orientation program, and I want to thank you for your recognition of congressional words, actions. The pause would be in contravention of this subcommittee and the full Appropriations Committee, and actually Congress's direction that no pause occur. And I appreciate you, again, recognizing the rule of law and your support for members of this committee and our desire to see that program continue. So thank you for the response that you gave us here today. I'm pleased to hear it. Now, let me turn to my questions. Let me first say that opening statements by other members of the subcommittee can be made part of your 7 minutes, or could be made as a request by unanimous consent to be made part of the record. Let me ask about the census. Mr. Attorney General, this past December, the Department of Justice sent an official letter to the Census Bureau requesting that it reinstate a question on the citizenship status to the 2020 census forms. This subcommittee also has jurisdiction over the funding of the census. So just let me give you the opportunity to explain why the department made this request, and will you elaborate on how the data gathered would be used?
I'd be pleased to discuss it as much as I can. The matter is in litigation, so I have some handicap in discussing all matters that you might be interested in. The census, I believe it's common sense and it would be appropriate to ask whether or not a individual being surveyed is a citizen of the United States or not. It had previously been in the census and remains a part of the annual survey that's done. So I think that's where we are. It can help us in determining a number of issues, particularly in our Civil Rights Division, and our attorneys have compiled some legal reasons we think that would justify that a question, and would be pleased to send that to you.
General, thank you very much. Let me turn to the COPS program. Your FY19 request proposes to transfer the COPS office to the COPS office to the Department Office of Justice Programs, but in executing this transfer, the program itself will take a $176 million reduction from FY18 enacted levels. As you know, the COPS program has received broad bipartisan support from this committee in the past. And Attorney General, could you explain to me, to the committee, why this restructuring is useful or necessary?
Well, it is popular with this committee and popular with the Congress. Most presidents often have not been as supportive as the Congress has. So once again, our budget is below the request you would ask. We do believe that we can save money and provide more money for the grants themselves by consolidating the COPS program in the Bureau of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, and its sub-component, Bureau of Justice Statistics. They have the infrastructure, the teamwork, and the capability of managing grants, and we think that would be a nice step to improve productivity and efficiency. It would not undermine the program, in my view, in any way. It's very popular with our law enforcement officers, and we also are creating a circumstance and recommending that more of the money be available as a priority to school resource officers to deal with violence in schools.
Thank you for your response. Let me turn to to HIDA, the high-intensity drug trafficking areas. Your FY19 request, you proposed to transfer the HIDA program from the Office of National Drug Control Policy under the Executive Office of the President to the Drug Enforcement Administration. So HIDA initiatives provide assistance through federal grants to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies operating in areas determined to be critical drug trafficking regions of the United States, including, unfortunately, several in Kansas. Often these HIDA initiatives work hand-in-hand with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I understand there are a large number of special agents within the DEA that are solely dedicated to the HIDA program. While I understand the desire and rationale of supporting the transfer of this program to DEA, I also recognize the concerns expressed by some of my colleagues and by certain law enforcement entities in Kansas that this transfer may hamper an important and successful grant program by moving it to an agency with no grant-making experience. Can you address these concerns and elaborate on why you believe that this programmatic shift is necessary?
Chairman Moran, the President, challenged all of us to seek to improve the efficiency and productivity of the government. You are correct that DEA and the HIDA organization have worked closely together for many, many years, I guess actually since the beginning. I remember when it was created. The HIDA reports through or to the ONDCP, the Office of National Drug Control Policy. That is a policy function. Bill Bennett was the first, I believe, director, and it was supposed to coordinate the various federal agencies that deal with drugs and to make sure that budgets were properly constructed of all, whether State Department, Defense Department, or Health and Human Services, wherever money is being spent on drugs. So I think it is a better organizational structure that function of ONDCP remain as its priority, and the actual investigating and prosecuting cases be done through the DEA. But the HIDA teams, the HIDA people, the community leaders that form the councils that lead the HIDAs will remain in effect. The only difference would be that the grant money would come out of, be managed from DEA, and that would, we hope, engender an even closer relationship.
General, thank you. Now my opportunity to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee for her questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General Sessions, for the decision on the legal orientation program. I'm pleased to hear that you have responded to the concerns that Senator Moran and I raised. I would just point out that one of the other items in that letter was a request for information regarding the methodology of the efficiency study that is underway. So I would hope that that information would be forthcoming to us as soon as that's available.
I will make sure that happens.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Senator Moran's question about the HIDA program, because that's one that has also been very important in New Hampshire, and I'm sure when you were there you heard how helpful it's been in addressing our opioid epidemic and actually capturing some of the drugs that have been coming across the border into New Hampshire. And I appreciate the interest in efficiency, although I've heard from the folks who participate in HIDA in New Hampshire that they are very happy where they are. But my question is, as Senator Moran pointed out, and as you acknowledged, the DEA is not a grant-making agency. So what is their plan for managing funding with this proposed move?
Well, we at the Department of Justice have tremendous experience in grant programs and managing. We will be very supportive of DEA, which is our subordinate agency, in helping them to establish that kind of activity. But again, I would say the actual funding, of course, will be Congress's decision. The leadership and the HIDA community organizations would remain the same, but their grant money would be managed from DEA, which I do believe would help make that a tighter and better relationship. They'd still have their own independence and their own leadership teams, but I think it could enhance that, and I do believe ONDCP probably never was created or expected to be a grant program of this kind.
And so is there any assessment of what the cost of setting up that grant-making mechanism would be within
I believe there is some expense in the initial setup, but I believe we can be able to do the grant program. It's certainly no more expense than currently exists, and maybe better with our deep experience in grant making in the Department of Justice. So we would go from the basically the White House ONDC office, ONDCP, to the Department of Justice.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about that. As I said in my opening statement, I am hearing from police chiefs throughout New Hampshire about their concern that the expected funding from the Burn JAG program has not yet been forthcoming. So the 7th Circuit released their decision on April 19th that the Justice Department exceeded its legal authority in placing conditions on Burn JAG. When you and I discussed this on the phone, you pointed out that win or lose, those grants would go out. So I just wondered what I should tell the police chiefs in New Hampshire about when they might expect funding.
Senator Shaheen, we intend to get that money out. Sooner is better than later. But the litigation is an important piece of litigation, and we placed only the most minor requirements on the grant program. We ask our state and local partners, if you want to get the Burn Law Enforcement Grant, we ask them to do two things. One was to give us notice 48 hours before an illegal alien who you've arrested for some crime is released, and to allow us to pick that individual up at the detention facility rather than releasing them on the streets and having our ICE officers and others have to try to find a criminal that needs to be arrested. And that's a very dangerous thing, places law officers at risk. That's what the Homeland Security officials pleaded with us to ask for, so we pared it down to a minimal thing we ask of them. We didn't ask the police to interview people. We didn't ask them to arrest people for us or anything like that, only to give us notice before release and to allow us to pick the individual up far more safely at the detention facility.
Well, this is a long-standing congressionally mandated formula grant program. So why does DOJ think it can place conditions on this program that's been operating for so many years based on the mandate that Congress has given it? And could you also address whether you plan to hold on funding for fiscal year 18 in the same way that you've been holding it for 17? Well,
to the first part of your question, this is a statute Congress passed, 34 U.S.C. 10102A6, and it says the Assistant Attorney General of OJP shall exercise such other powers and functions as may be vested in the Assistant Attorney General pursuant to this chapter or by delegation of the Attorney General, including placing special conditions on all grants and determining priority purposes for formula grants. So we felt when we went to court that these minor conditions for receiving a federal grant were very reasonable, and we're deeply disappointed that the court has not, at least to this moment, seen itself able to agree. And we'll, of course, abide by the law, but we do want to review the situation and see if we cannot improve it.
And I'm out of time, but just briefly, I know that DOJ filed another motion with the 7th Circuit on April 23rd. So do you expect to continue to go all the way up to the Supreme Court with your motions if you're denied again in the 7th Circuit?
I'll have to talk with our lawyers. They worked hard on this case, and we've not seen. So one thing about it, it's one thing to deal with the merits. It's another matter to deal with the preliminary injunction. So we have an injunction that I think went beyond the law in the sense that the case was first raised in Chicago. It has its own unique set of laws and policies, but the judge issued an order that bound the entire United States. Many of those are perfectly happy to comply with these requirements of the Department of Justice. So it's a frustrating matter. It's a big deal, and I think I have to say I've been appreciative of our law enforcement leaders who I think by and large agree that these minimum requirements are legitimate. So they've been patient with us, but I am worried about it. We're working hard to bring it to a conclusion.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. For states like New Hampshire, where we have no sanctuary cities, it puts us at a special disadvantage.
Senator, thank you. I now recognize the Vice Chairman of the full committee, Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, last week I sent you a letter regarding your commitment to recuse from any existing or future investigation of any matters related anyway to the campaigns for president. Are you recused from the federal investigation of the president's attorney, Michael Cohen, which reportedly does involve matters directly related to the campaign, including possible campaign violation?
Senator Leahy, I am honoring the recusal in every case and every matter that comes before the Department of Justice. I committed to that in my confirmation hearing, and I have honored that and will continue to honor that.
Does that include Cohen?
It is the policy of the Department of Justice that those who've recused themselves not state the details of it or confirm the existence of a investigation or the scope or nature of that investigation.
I understand.
And so I feel like following the rules of the department, which I'm trying to teach all of our people to do, that I should not answer that question. It would be inappropriate for me to do so.
I know the question was not a surprise to you, and nor is your answer a surprise to me, but recusal is not discretionary. It's required by Justice Department regulations when you have a political relationship with the president, which you've already acknowledged, and the president has a specific and substantial interest in the investigation. Now, the federal judge granted the president's request to formally intervene in this matter, which is here in Judge Kimball Wood's order. And I'll be glad to give you a copy of this if you like. But Judge Wood allows the president to intervene, so he is a member, or he is part of that investigation. And that would suggest he has a specific and substantial interest. So wouldn't, by Justice Department regulations, doesn't that require you to be recused?
Senator Leahy, I am required to be recused from any matter involving the substance of the matters you raised in your opening statement. Absolutely, and I will comply with that. But it is a policy of the department that if you get into discussing the details of those matters, you can reveal the existence, scope, or breadth or nature of a matter that would be inappropriate. So I think the best answer for me, having given it some thought, is to say that I should not announce that. In fact, recusals that happen all the time in the department are not made public, but they're internally binding.
Have you sought any advice to career ethics officials about whether you should or should not recuse yourself in the Cohen matter?
I have sought advice on those matters, and I have not met with the top ethics person on it, but I can assure you I've not violated my recusal.
And you do agree that the Justice Department regulations require recusal when you have a political relationship with somebody who has a specific and substantial interest in the investigation. That is basically the regulation, is it not?
That is the regulation, I believe, 600.1, but that's a regulation that I felt required me to recuse myself.
It was reported last weekend that you told the White House counsel you would consider resigning as Attorney General if the President fired Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein. I'm not going to ask you about that conversation. But if the President were to improperly fire either the Deputy Attorney General, who supervises the Russian investigation, or the Special Counsel, would you resign in opposition?
Senator Leahy, that calls for a speculative answer, or question calls for speculation. I just am not able to do that.
Even though you were surprised by that question. You don't have to answer that. Your smile answers the question. And lastly, you've been asked about LOP. Whatever study is being done there, that'll be open and transparent, will it not?
We will do so. And look, I have some doubts about that program. The committee believes in that program. We'll talk about it and before any action occurs.
Yeah, because we have appropriated the money and we have directed the program to go forward. So I would hope that you do not take any action on it without being in touch with the committees, both the senior Republicans, senior Democrats of the committees that have instructed it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chairman, thank you very much. Senator from Maine, Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me first congratulate you. And I very much look forward to working with you and the ranking member. Mr. Attorney General, before I turn to my questions, I want to thank you for your leadership on an issue that matters greatly to me, and that is fraud and scams that are directed against our senior citizens. You've really taken a leadership role on this. I know the department announced in February that more than 250 defendants have been charged with scamming more than 1 million Americans for a total amount in excess of $500 million. It's an issue we've been trying to get the Justice Department to pay attention to for years, and I very much appreciate your leadership. I'd now like to turn to my questions, which may not be quite as pleasing to your ears as my thank you. The administration has now lost its third DACA case in federal court. That program and the fate of the group of young people for whom there is a pretty widespread consensus that we should try to help continues to be clouded by uncertainty. Given the repeated failures in court and the fact that the president has repeatedly indicated that border security remains a high priority for him, wouldn't it make sense for the administration to revisit the bipartisan DACA compromise that was proposed earlier this year that received 54 votes on the Senate floor, which would have funded the president's border security program in its entirety while providing a pathway to citizenship for DACA young people who have good records?
Senator Collins, I do believe there is an opportunity for legislation by Congress. I served 20 years on your side of the table. My feeling is that that's possible. I've said that in a number of hearings that I've been in since I've been Attorney General. So I think that's possible. I would say that 2 district courts, one in New York and California, did issue injunctions stopping the simple removal of the the memoranda, really is all it was, of the Homeland Security to enact DACA. DACA was basically rejected by Congress. Congress did not pass it. And the president had said repeatedly he could not do it on his own. But once it was not passed in Congress, then the president got his Homeland Security team to enact this matter. I think it was unlawful. It's pretty much the finding of the Fifth Circuit in a related case involving DAPA. And there was a court in Maryland that rejected this kind of injunction. So 3 courts ruled on this DACA. 2 said it was not sustainable, and 1 said it was. So we believe that the right thing is legislation. I would like to see law enforcement. Look, I'll be frank. My view is a plan that will end the illegality, along with some relief for the DACA young people, is possible. It can be done, and the president has laid out a number of options, and it's been unfortunate that it hadn't come together.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, many of us on this this panel worked very hard to try to get that done and to put DACA in law. And I think that had the Department of Homeland Security not issued a very misleading press release the night before the vote, accompanied by a veto threat by the president, we were there. At one point, I could count the 60 votes, but we want to legislate in that area. I agree with you that it should be legislated. And I hope that with the court rulings that there is an extra impetus for the administration to work with us. And it's also an opportunity for the president to get a very high priority of his in strengthening the border, which we also need to do. Yeah. So I thank you.
Senators, just let me say, I think this is doable, but it cannot be done if we haven't fixed the illegal immigration flow. And my concern about the bill that you referred to was it did not sufficiently close the loopholes and fix some of the problems that we have. If we could get that done, I think the possibility of a successful legislation would be greater. That's what the president said, and I think it could be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Hawaii, Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking forward to working with you. I will miss you on the MilCon VA subcommittee, but I understand and forgive you. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here. I want to follow up on a question that Chairman Moran asked about the citizenship question on the census. Communities of color, advocacy organizations around the census are frankly worried that the presence of that question is going to discourage participation in immigrant communities. And I understand that it's on the long form, and I understand that it's not without precedent that we're doing that. But I have 2 questions for you. First, how do you respond to those communities of color who are worried that this will simply scare people to not respond to the census at all, number 1? And number 2 is, you indicated that the Civil Rights Division wants the data, and I'm wondering why.
I'll be glad to send you the letter that we've produced regarding this issue, detailing the advantages of it, having the information. I do note that it is being asked on the other survey, and I would suggest that I've learned it's the 12th question on the form, the last question, I believe. It shouldn't scare people. They don't have to answer it, really. And so I would think that that's a very reasonable thing, and I believe the concerns of it are overblown.
Okay, let's move on. I really appreciate what you're doing on opioids, and I am especially pleased that this committee and others are working in a bipartisan fashion to solve this problem. And I want you to interpret the following line of questioning not in an adversarial way. I want to ask you about medical marijuana. And I want to tell you that I'm the son of a principal investigator, and I came to the question of medical marijuana with great skepticism. But there are credible scientific studies that show that where medical marijuana is legal, opioid overdose deaths have gone down, and these studies are published in the Journal of the American Medical Association and the RAND Corporation with the input from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. The opioid epidemic is a major crisis, and I'm wondering whether you think, given your history as a successful conservative politician with a certain set of beliefs about marijuana in particular, whether given two things happening at once, there's all kinds of new data that shows an inverse correlation between the availability of medical marijuana and opioid deaths and opioid prescriptions and opioid illegal activity, and your commitment to try to reduce this opioid epidemic. Do you have at least an aperture to look at these data and reconsider your opposition to medical marijuana and marijuana in general?
Medical marijuana, as one physician told me, whoever heard of taking a medicine when you have no idea how much medicine you're taking and ingesting it in the fashion that it is, which is in itself unhealthy. However, I think there may well be some benefits from medical marijuana, and it's perfectly appropriate to study that. I do not believe at this point that, I think one study that suggested there's some sort of inverse relationship between increased marijuana use and reducing of deaths. I did see that. I've asked my staff to take a look at it because science is very important. And I don't believe that will be sustained in the long run. The American Medical Association is absolutely, resolutely opposed to marijuana use. I think so is the Pediatric Association.
Sure,
they've studied it over years. So it's a matter of science, and sure, I think we should be free to discuss it.
My final question, the DEA in August of 2016 called for applications to produce more federally approved research-grade marijuana. Since then, the Department of Justice has received 25 applications, but none of them have been responded to either with an approval or denial. What is the status of those applications?
We are moving forward, and we will add fairly soon, I believe, the paperwork and reviews will be completed, and then we will add additional suppliers of marijuana under the controlled circumstances. But there is, a lot of people didn't know, I didn't know, a treaty, international treaty of which we're a member that requires certain controls in that process, and the previous proposal violated that treaty. We've now gotten language, I believe, complies with the treaty and will allow this process to go forward.
If the chair will indulge me, one final comment. We're all evolving on this issue, some quicker than others, maybe some too quick, and I really believe that we have to do this in the proper way. I think there are good civil rights reasons for decriminalizing and for pursuing a federalist approach around this, but if we're narrowly addressing the question of whether or not this is medicine, then we do need the Department of Justice, the FDA, and everybody to work together to pursue that question, double-blind studies and all. And I also think that we need to understand we are in a humanitarian crisis when it comes to the opioid epidemic, which means that we may have to cast aside some of the things that we've believed all of our lives as it relates to other drugs and look at harm reduction. I appreciate you keeping an open mind along those lines.
Thank you, Senator Schatz.
Senator, thank you. Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me add to that conversation a little bit before I jump into a line of questions. I am one of those skeptical individuals that so far has not evolved on this issue of marijuana. I have a hard time believing that if only more of our parents smoke more marijuana, our kids would be so much better and our families would be so much better, and employment would be so much better if more of our employees smoke more marijuana. I just have a hard time believing that. And as far as medicinal issues, this is an area the NIH has done active work on, and NIH currently has several $billion that the Appropriations Committee has allocated to them to be able to study pain medications that are non-addictive to try to address that, and that was entirely appropriate to do. We have an opioid epidemic. I'd rather not swap an opioid epidemic with addiction to marijuana and just say we solved the problem. We didn't solve the problem long term, and so I'd love to be able to continue to maintain this. There are ways to be able to manage all kinds of different things to be able to manage pain, but my preference would be that our nation doesn't become more and more addicted to marijuana to be able to solve our opioid addiction. With that, let me mention a couple of things. Budget related, you have made some recommendations on combining some entities and moving some things around, specifically with ATF. And I'd like to get a chance to talk to you a little bit more about that. What proposals are you making with ATF in particular to be able to work on some efficiencies?
Well, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms originally came out of the Department of Treasury. And because revenuers collected revenue, the old moonshining, chasing ATF guys collected because you weren't paying taxes on your moonshine. So that's the history of it. But over the years, ATF has shifted far more to being the frontline agents on violent crime, bombs, explosives, arson, and firearms. So that's where the trend has gone. So this agreement, I think, is a smart one. It moves the tax part of ATF that still exists back to Treasury and keeps a leaner, more focused ATF on firearms and explosives in the Department of Justice.
How long do you think it would take to make that transition?
I think we could do it within the year, and we would expect to if Congress would approve it. ATF has accepted it. Their leadership is supportive, so I believe it's something that would be good, be efficient, and a smart realignment of resources.
Okay. Any other areas of realignment of resources that you'd recommend with DEA, ATF, FBI, any of those as well that you would recommend that are similar to that?
Well, we've made a number of recommendations for consolidation in the Bureau of Prisons. We've made some within some of the regional offices of Community Relations Service. We've had a number of other changes that we are proposing.
All right, well,
we believe that every dollar that we can properly expend at the point of the spear, effectively carrying out the taxpayer's desire rather than feeding a bureaucracy, is good for America, and that's our goal.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Your predecessor, Eric Holder, and I had multiple conversations over several years about an issue between ATF and FBI and their processes of how they actually do an investigation. FBI has one set of processes, ATF has another set of processes. It came out most evident during the Fast and Furious time period around 2010 and 11 when there was a close examination of the processes that ATF went through to be able to do that investigation for Fast and Furious, and the FBI agents immediately stepped out and said we would never be allowed to do what ATF did. So during that time period, a lot of conversations that I had with Eric Holder was, is there a study to be able to look at and try to figure out if these two processes need to be aligned, if ATF needs to have more similar structure to what FBI does? How does that work? Eric Holder over and over again told me year after year, we're going to take a look at it, we're going to take a look at it, but I don't think ever did. I never got a report back to try to finalize that. Could you help us take a look at that? Again, this is not trying to hurt ATF, but trying to figure out if we've got good established processes, why do we have two different sets of processes and two different entities there?
I would be glad to discuss that with you and see if what kind of problems exist. I don't think there are any processes that should have justified Fast and Furious where assault weapons are allowed to walk, as we call it, across the border to.
Well, that was the number one thing I heard from FBI folks.
So I don't know how that happened yet. I know you've dug into it as probably as deeply as anybody in Congress, so thank you for that.
Okay. Let me ask one more strange question. Are we out of crime victim needs? So the Crime Victims Fund is out there. It has about $10 billion sitting in it. Do we have that fully established? All crime victim issues are taken care of, and we don't need to allocate additional dollars towards that area?
No.
Well, that $10 billion is sat there and has been used as what's called a changes in mandatory program year after year.
Chimps.
And it's had this fake spending year after year. I did notice in your budget that you're recommending that we not use that as a pay for, that we set a ceiling on that spending, save that money for crime victims, and not try to shift that over to somewhere else.
Our budget would eliminate that procedure. It's something I've opposed, but it's stuck. It's been, perhaps as a member of this committee, something might happen, but it is it's something that's continued for a long time. We propose fixing that part.
Well, I met yesterday with a group of crime victims, and they had a real concern that that money is used not for crime victims, but is used for a gimmick in Congress, and they'd love to see that money actually go to crime victim organizations and uses with that. With that, I yield back.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you. Look forward to working with you and the ranking member and others. Mr. Attorney General, welcome. And I want to associate myself with the comments of Senator Collins with respect to DACA, and that's obviously part of an ongoing discussion, but we've got to address this critical issue. We all have an interest in protecting the integrity of the Justice Department, and as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, you made a statement at a hearing that I thoroughly agree with, and I'm quoting, "The power to pardon is a legitimate power. It is one that ought to be exercised with great care." And then you ended saying, "I believe in the role of the pardon attorney," unquote. The pardon attorney is an office within the DOJ, is it not?
It is a position in the Department of Justice.
And can you think of any pardon during the 8 years of the Obama administration that did not go through the office of the pardon attorney?
I don't recall. I know a number did during the Clinton administration.
Starting with the Obama administration,
Okay.
2 terms, 8 years. I don't think there was one.
I don't know, actually.
And I don't think there was a single pardon during the presidency of George W. Bush that did not go through the office, the pardon office. And you're right, the comment you made was in connection with pardons made by President Clinton. But my question to you is, do you stand by that statement that you made back during that hearing, that the pardon attorney the pardon power ought to be exercised with great care, and that you believe in the role of the pardon attorney in that process? Do you stand by that statement?
I don't think that statement needs modifying, but it's obviously in context that the President of the United States clearly has the constitutional power to
I understand, Senator.
Let me finish. No. Execute pardons without inquiring of the pardon attorney. It's been done very frequently in history.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Attorney General, Mr. Chairman, I'm not disputing the President's pardon authority. I'm just quoting a statement you made that I agree with respect to the role of the pardon attorney. And at the time, you made comments in the hearing saying that not going through that process was an abuse of power. So my question to you is whether or not you think not going through the pardon attorney is an abuse of the power, not an unauthorized power, but do you think it's an inappropriate use of that power?
I don't know that I use that phrase, abuse of power, because it's clearly not. It's clearly within the power of the President to execute pardons without the pardon attorney. If you're doing a lot of pardons and you want to have a lot of cases and you want to have them reviewed by independent force, the pardon attorney provides a real asset to a chief executive before executing a pardon.
Did the pardon of Sheriff Joseph Arpaio go through the pardon attorney office?
I don't believe it did.
Yeah. Did the pardon of Scooter Libby go through that office?
I don't believe it did.
Okay. But do you agree with what you said earlier, that that is the appropriate course of action for a pardon? I'm not asking you what the President's authority is. I'm asking you what you think the appropriate course of action is to make sure that the public has confidence in the integrity of the process.
There are opportunities that the pardon attorney can be utilized very effectively, and it has been over time. but I don't think it's in any way required that any president seek the opinion.
It's not a requirement. I'm quoting from a statement you made saying it was abuse of process in a particular case made by President Clinton. Let me ask you about something else that I also think we agree on in part.
Well, I would just say the pardons President Clinton made were stunning, shocking, and unacceptable on the merits. But the two, our power was 80-some years of age, and he was convicted of a misdemeanor.
Mr. Attorney General, I'm not going to
Libby
speak
is
the substance.
well known the circumstances.
In both cases, as you know, they did not go
contributed greatly to America.
What you described was the appropriate process. Let me ask you about the National Public Safety Partnership, PSP, which is a program established by the administration to help fight violent crime, one that I support. The city of Baltimore was invited to apply in a letter from the Justice Department back in 2017. The Justice Department said to the city, we've concluded that your jurisdictions have levels of violence that exceed the national average and that you're ready to receive the intensive assistance from the department. Then they got these 3 criteria that were listed by the department with respect to what you refer to as sanctuary cities. And the city's application was denied. Here's what I want to say at this point in time. Baltimore City does not have jurisdiction over the detention centers in Baltimore City. That's a state of Maryland decision. So we may have differences on the criteria you set out with, and as Senator Shaheen said, the 7th Circuit has reviewed this, and I think those decisions are going to apply also to your criteria in the National Public Safety Partnership program. But setting that aside, I hope you'll work with me on this Baltimore City. We have a violent crime problem, and the city of Baltimore does not have the laws or state laws regarding DHS as the access to the Department of Homeland Security to their jail. So I just ask for your commitment to see if we can look for a way to see if they can qualify for the funds.
I would be glad to do that. We have had some, I think more than one, at least one circumstance in which the jail was run by somebody else other than the jurisdiction that appeared to be. So that created a problem and actually led to the approval of the grant. So I'll be glad to look at that.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to both you and the ranking member, know that I look forward to working with you as you execute this appropriations bill through your committee, and we'll move it on to the floor. I look forward to that commitment. Mr. Attorney General, it's good to see you again. Thank you for the conversation last week. I wanted to raise again with you the subject of marijuana. Alaska is one of those states that has moved forward not only with the medical marijuana, but also the sale and cultivation of recreational use, a very aggressive state regulation. This was not something that I had supported through that statewide initiative. In fact, I worked against it, but it was passed resoundingly through the state, and my constituents expect me to work to represent them. Mr. Chairman, I'd like unanimous consent to enter into the record a resolution that was recently passed by the Alaska legislature.
Without objection.
This is HJ Res 21. It was passed unanimously out of both houses, and it urges the federal government to respect the authority of the state of Alaska to regulate marijuana use, production, and distribution, and generally respect states' rights. Mr. Attorney General, we have talked about this in the aftermath of your decision to withdraw the Cole Memorandum. I had been disappointed with that and expressed that I was concerned that the Department of Justice was less than a full partner with the states. I do understand that the White House has expressed support for legislation that will respect state supremacy when it comes to regulation in the spirit of federalism. I think that the comments that were made by my colleague from Hawaii in terms of members evolving on this is important, but I do think as we're seeing the states move forward, legislation like this is timely. The states are telling us, though, that they need the Department of Justice to be a partner in the orderly administration of states' regulatory regimes and not standing in the way as an obstacle. So I understand your position on this. Again, we've had many conversations, but I would hope that we could have your assurance that within the Department of Justice, that the department will not be an obstacle to the consideration of this sort of legislation that may move forward.
Well, I can't make a commitment about what position we would take at this time until we know exactly what's involved, but it's not so much on a question of supremacy as a question of simple law. Alaska can pass laws about drugs that make certain drugs illegal that Washington does not make illegal, and therefore can't be prosecuted in federal court, but could be in Alaska. Likewise, the federal government has passed some laws regarding marijuana that I'm not able to remove from the books. Congress, you have passed them. They're on the books. And I just feel like that our priorities, look, I'll be frank, our priorities are fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine. People are dying by massive amounts as a result of those drugs. We have very few, almost zero, virtually zero small marijuana cases. But if they're a big dealer and illegally acting and violating federal law, our federal agents may work that case. I don't feel like I'm able to give a pass, some protection, some sanctuary for it. That's maybe the only difference we have at this point on how it will play out.
I do understand that. Again, I recognize that if there is a venue or an opportunity for us to advance legislation on this, that there is that open door for conversation about truly the inherent conflicts that we're seeing coming out of the states and working with on the federal level. Let me ask you about another issue that I raised with you earlier, and this is regarding support for tribal justice programs. In the FY18 budget, we were able to include a funding stream for Victims of Crime Act funds for tribes. It's a set-aside, it's a 5% set-aside. It's about $130 million to help for victims on tribal lands. We had completed a study in Alaska. Well, actually, it was a broader study. It was a 2016 study from the National Institute of Justice. More than 4 out of 5 Alaska Native and American Indian women report having experienced violence in their lifetime. More than half report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. Nearly 40% have experienced violence in the past year, 14% who have experienced sexual violence in the last year. Our statistics when it comes to Alaska Native women and American Indian women are horrible when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to the sexual assault. And so I think that we're making a small step forward with this small set-aside, and first time ever to see anything going towards those on tribal lands and in Alaska where we have different issues in the sense of not having Indian country, but a recognition that we must address this. So 5%. I would like to see that increased. I would hope that we'd be able to work with the Department of Justice to address this issue, because we have not made a difference in reducing these horrible statistics.
Senator Murkowski, thank you actually for raising that. I heard that before I was confirmed. You and I talked about it. I've traveled the country meeting with U.S. attorneys. I hear it a lot in their districts. I just came back from Albuquerque, and we talked about the Navajo tribal lands and the problems that they have. This budget, the president's budget, actually is frugal compared to, it's a frugal budget, but it has more for tribal issues than the even your 2018 budget, and it does it the way you suggested through set-asides. A 7% set-aside is recommended for the Office of Justice programs. All those programs, 7% would be set aside for tribal individuals, and 5% of the Crime Victims Fund. I believe the Congress has not yet got to those numbers. But I do agree with you that it is a very difficult situation, and Alaska has a particularly unusual situation without having specific tribal lands that receive specific funds from the government. So I would be glad to continue to work with you on it.
Good, and that's why so many of these funds, whether it's the burn grants, the VAWA funding, the DNA backlog, the Victims of Crime Act, the Crimes Against Children, all of these grant fund opportunities are so significant for us. So
I did
put that on your list.
Okay, I would note that just yesterday, I had a meeting with your United States Attorney here in D.C., Brian Schroeder. He's on my 15-member Attorney General's Advisory Committee, and he and your attorney from Oklahoma, Northern Oklahoma, chair the subcommittee on Indian Affairs, and we both talked about this specifically. They would like to see us do some things better than we have in the past. They're providing strong leadership, and I know he'd be glad to share his thoughts with you or your staff.
Good. They're good guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from California, Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back, Attorney General. I'm sure you miss us terribly. I want to follow up on something that Senator Collins said. Senator Collins and Senator Manchin essentially convened a large group of bipartisan senators on the DACA situation to try to see if some proposal could be put together. Virtually everything went down on the floor. And in conversations since, what I've learned is that in negotiations with the president, Senator Schumer tried to consummate a deal where the president essentially got what he wanted with respect to border security if the DACA bill went through. Well, that was clearly not successful. You referred to certain loopholes in your conversation with Senator Collins. I'm wondering if you could be more precise, because we are really very interested and involved in trying to find a solution.
Well, thank you. Your support for this would be very important. I think there's a bipartisan opportunity to join together and say once and for all, we believe we should have a lawful system of immigration, and we're going to support things that actually work to help achieve that. I've not so jokingly said for years, Congress will pass anything on immigration as long as it doesn't work. If it works, somehow it never passes. But we've got the Flores consent decree that's been in place for 20 years that's causing monumental problems, particularly in California. We have the situation where you say, as the critics say, magic words, and you're in backlog case systems. People get released on bail. They don't show up for their hearings and all of that. There's a whole host of problems like that I think most members of Congress of both parties would probably work to fix.
Well, is it the number? In the bill that Senator Graham and Senator Durbin were co-sponsors of, I think the total number was 3.3 million. Was that the problem?
That is a big
number.
The problem
was in the bill, because it was discussed and discussed and discussed, and then it all came a cropper in the votes. So it would be very helpful if you could be helpful to us and just identify some specifics that we could look at and try to put something together.
Well,
Would you do that?
That's certainly a fair request. Yes,
okay.
I will.
Okay, let me go on then to bump stocks. DOJ recently started the rulemaking process to ban bump stocks under the National Firearms Act. And I have it in my assault weapons bill, which has some 29, 30 co-sponsors right now. But ATF has said for years it can't ban bump stocks because the National Firearms Act doesn't allow it. ATF repeated this position in April of 2017 and has repeatedly stated in public that ATF cannot ban bump stocks under current law. That's why we have proposed legislation to do so. How long do you expect this rulemaking to take? And if you find out what we found out, will you support a legal ban?
I would need to review the legislation, but we have done intensive legal research. It always seemed to me that a bump stock converts a gun to effectively a fully automatic weapon. How can this be a close call? However, I acknowledge that the lawyers at ATF did a lot of research. It's a complicated matter, and they concluded it was not. We've continued to review that. We believe we've changed that view in the Department of Justice, and we believe the regulation could be effective to solve the problem. And it's up for comment now, made public. Hopefully, move forward and would solve the problem.
By when do you expect the rulemaking will conclude?
I think it won't be much longer. I'm not sure, but I think it's just a few months. 90 days, I believe, is what's left on the time.
Thank you. The Justice Department announced a policy change 1 month ago, indicating that it would remove records of certain fugitives from the FBI's NICS gun background check databases. Now, previously, all fugitives were recorded in the NICS database, so they couldn't buy guns. Now, only fugitives who cross state lines are included in the database. I understand that local law enforcement organizations have strongly opposed the change. It's puzzling to me as to why the department would do that, why you would want armed fugitives.
Well, the issue I'm most familiar with is the one involving whether or not a warrant for your arrest, and a person is therefore a fugitive if they're running from arrest but haven't been convicted. The statute is pretty clear. You have to be convicted before you can have a gun, your Second Amendment right to possess a firearm.
Even in the case that the fugitive had committed a major felony?
Apparently that is the law. In other words, you lose your right if you've been convicted.
Cross state lines. I don't understand what the department sees is the need to do this.
Well, I would say I'll review the state line question. I should be able to answer that, but I'm not able to. But I do know the warrant problem is a product of statutory language.
Okay, I'm over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Senator from Arkansas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's right. No, I'm correct.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General Sessions, for being here. And we do appreciate your hard work and the great job that you're doing.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the burn jag also, in the sense that in Arkansas, we are doing a good job of helping you in your efforts regarding following the law, being helpful. As I go around the state, though, and I talk to my county sheriffs, I talk to my local law enforcement and individuals regarding, the importance of this. This is not a whole lot of money, but it really is the difference in being able to stand up the drug task forces that they have and not. These are small departments. I'm out and about as much as anybody, as were you, when you were a senator representing your folks. But when you talk to the people that are on the ground, again, not having this funding really is making a big difference in a very negative way. Can you talk about, for those states, for those individuals that are doing a good job, when it's going to get released?
Senator Bozeman, it's just maddening to us that people who totally support our ICE officers and allow them to do the minimal things they ask of local law enforcement can't get this money. So what happened was a suit was filed in Chicago that said that they may or may not be in violation of our grant conditions, and they not only wanted to block us from denying Chicago, they denied the judge issued a nationwide injunction. Right. And Chicago's law and circumstances are unique. All these other people who comply with the Department of Justice, all the other people that have other and different laws and backgrounds are enjoined by the same single federal judge, 1 out of 600. Now, the whole process is stopped, and law enforcement has been impacted, and we are determined to try to deal with this issue in an appropriate way. It's painful for me not to see the money go out, particularly the people who want to help us and work with us every day. But they've been pretty supportive and understanding, I got to say, although I know it's difficult for them. So I hear you. We're working on it. It's a high priority of mine.
Good. We appreciate that. And it is an important issue. Another thing that I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is when we look at the fiscal year 2019 budget request, it would reduce the drug court funding by more than 40%, reduce veterans treatment courts by 70%. When you look at the recidivism rate as a result of being in drug court, it's dramatically lower than those people being incarcerated. Also, when you put somebody in jail, they're required to work when they're in drug court. But when you put somebody in jail, not only are you, the recidivism rate and all that, but also the family is going to wind up probably on some sort of public welfare assistance because you've lost an income earner. And so I'd really appreciate it if you'd look at that and just kind of review that, look at the statistics and things. I think those programs, if there's an answer, instead of reducing those programs, I think they should be increased dramatically.
Well, Congress works its will, and we have a tight budget, and we try. But I do agree with you, Senator Bozeman. I helped initiate the establishment of a drug court in Mobile, Alabama, in the early 1980s. Right. One of the first in the country, and it's still in existence. And I think it's a positive thing in general. I've kept up with it over the years. It deals with the kind of state cases that are often smaller offenders, addicted offenders, single mothers, single fathers, whatever. That it's just a difficult time, and some of them can work their way through that drug court and stay with their families and save the cost of incarceration.
You're exactly right. And again, have to work, have to stay clean with the drug test, or the judge has the hammer, to actually put them in prison. So
if they misbehave, they come before the judge repeatedly, and he addresses them directly. It has a real impact.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman. Senator Manchin. Yes, Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Justice. Good to have you here. Let me say, first of all, I want to thank you. We had a major drug raid, and you all were very much involved in that and made it happen. And I personally want to thank you for the state of West Virginia. It was a major drug raid between Detroit and Huntington, West Virginia. You all led it. You were involved in it. We had all agencies working together. It made a big, big impression and made a big help on us. So thank you for that, sir.
Thank you.
Also, I want to say that the Bureau of Prisons routinely uses a process known as augmentation to assign custodial duties to non-correctional staff, teachers, plumbers, fill gaps in staffing and all that. At the Hazleton Federal Correction Center in West Virginia, there have been over 60 major security incidents since the beginning of this year, including one inmate's death earlier this month. I fought to ensure that the recently passed omnibus bill included language directing the Bureau to curtail its over-reliance on augmentation, people that didn't have these types of experiences, and instead hire additional full-time correctional staff before continuing to augment existing staff. So despite all this, the Director of Bureau of Prisons, Mr. Mark Inch, sent a memo out last week stating that augmentation is an important mechanism used by our agency to operate safely and efficiently. So only thing I can ask, Mr. Justice, is what do we have to do to get Mr. Inch's attention and ask for some help?
Well, the augmentation has gone on for a long time, Senator Manchin, and it's an established policy, and everybody that participates in augmentation is supposed to, and I believe is, also trained as a in the incarceration management. Number one.
This is a tough one. This is a tough prison. This is a tough prison here.
Well, facts could be different in different situations, but the augmentation program to eliminate that would be highly expensive. I mean, you would have to hire an entirely new guard for one person to spend 2 hours through the lunchroom helping keep an eye on things.
We're just understaffed. I think that's it in a nutshell. And in that prison, with the amount of population base we have, if you could just look into that, sir, and if your staff could give us the attention we need there, we'd be greatly appreciative, because they're having serious problems there. And the staff morale is low. We're having a hard time keeping people now because of the danger. That's all we're asking for. All right. And I know you will do that, and I appreciate it. I have another one, too, which is I'm proud to have FBI presence in Clarksburg, West Virginia. As you know, the NICS unit is there. This facility performs a wide variety of functions, such as housing the Criminal Justice Information System, where the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System is located, working in conjunction with WVU, implementing the cutting-edge study of biometrics in the field of criminal justice, being a resource for law enforcement, cybersecurity, and combating cybercrime. In order to protect the important work conducted at these facilities, there are approximately 75 police officers assigned to the site in Clarksburg. Additionally, there are about 173 other officers serving at sites in Washington, D.C., Quantico, Virginia, and New York City. Because of an inadvertent error committed while drafting the legislation intended to establish the FBI police force, these officers, these 70, they're not receiving the same pay and benefits that they are entitled to with what jobs they're doing. I think it's a snafu when all this was written. I mentioned this to Director Ray yesterday, so he knows it and his staff has it, but I wanted to also put it on your radar screen, sir. So I would just like to have your help, if you will, on this, because it's just an unfairness in the system we've been trying to correct. And this was done in 2002. We have the code, the section, and everything else that whoever you want us to work with on your staff to check that out, I'd be happy to do.
Well, that's a reasonable request, and we'll follow up with Director Wright, and if we could be of assistance, we will.
The opiate addiction that we have, and we've talked about this before, trying to change the law back to where the DEA can do its job. You and I have talked about
right.
I think we've given, and you were telling me you need a language from us to do that, or do you have the ability to change that?
I appreciate the conversations we've had on it. I thought we had reached an accord on the language, but if not, I'll be glad to follow up and see if we can't get that done.
Yeah. Okay.
I appreciate your interest and leadership on it.
Well, we're ground zero. West Virginia is number one. We had 909 deaths of a population of 1,800,000 people, so we're just off the charts. And but your attention is going to be greatly appreciated, but it's helping immensely. This drug raid made a big difference, and that we can do more.
Your U.S. Attorney Mike Stewart is so excited. I got a letter from him, and it reminded me when I was a young U.S. Attorney.
You got a good.
He was on steroids. I told him compared to me, he was so excited.
We got a good guy there.
He is really fired up to make some changes there, and we're going to support him.
Yeah, he's well liked. He's well liked, and he'll do a good job. We're really proud to have Mike. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator from South Carolina, Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, I think you're doing a very good job for the country, and many of us up here have your back, and I want you to know that.
Thank you.
As to the budget, it's a 6% reduction over FY 18 levels. Do you think now's the time to reduce the Department of Justice's budget, given the threats we face?
Well, we submitted a frugal budget It comes through the Office of Management and Budget and trying to achieve a total number for the government.
Well, let me ask
I
you
would
no-
just follow up to say it was submitted before the 2018
Okay.
appropriations
Good man.
that did, in fact, helped us give us some money extra.
Oh, so the money you got extra, you think you can spend it wisely to make
We're
it safer?
going to work very hard to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. The Wire Act. I know you've recused yourself from reviewing the Wire Act. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I talked to Mr. Rosenstein about that months ago, and Senator Feinstein are very worried that this bizarre interpretation of the Wire Act by the Obama administration is going to lead to holy hell ungoverned spaces when it comes to internet gambling. Could you please tell him to give me an answer? Or do I have to tell him?
Deputy Rosenstein?
Rosenstein, yeah.
I will pass along your
Okay, other than
request.
that one glitch, do you agree with me he's doing a good job?
He works every day to do the job that he is called upon to do that got dropped in his...
Do you have confidence in him?
I do have confidence.
I do too. Thank you. Gitmo. The president issued an executive order saying he would use Gitmo when appropriate. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Do you think we're ever going to use it in my lifetime?
And nobody, well, you and I have spent a lot of time working on it together since I've been Attorney General and before.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well,
I'll just have to be honest with you.
You have been
It
terrific.
could be, certainly, if we have a surge in arrestees.
We got 489 prisoners that we've captured from our operations around Raqqa. They're going to get out of jail. They're in a makeshift prison held by the Syrian Democratic Forces. It's not a nation state, and these are really hardcore killers. Some of them, two of them, were the Beatles. You've heard of the Beatles, right? Not the rock group, but the Beheaders.
I do know the Beatles.
Okay, well, two of these people are in our custody. They're insisting on a fair process. I intend to give them one, but they cut off the heads of American citizens and our allies, and I know where you're at. I would appreciate it if you would push the administration to live up to the president's promise to use it wisely when it comes to Gitmo. Would you please do that?
I will remain focused on that.
Okay, now when it comes to the war on terror, Raqqa may have been taken back, but we got to hold it. From your point of view, the threat streams that you're aware of, are they growing regarding radical Islam threat toward the whole homeland?
We don't think there's been any significant reduction. I do believe General Mattis deserves credit for his tactics of crushing ISIS, and I think a lot fewer of them got out than perhaps they intended, which means there are fewer of them available to come to America to kill Americans. But I think time will tell how many come out of that war zone and attack us.
Is this a priority?
There's definitely many that prefer to do that and desire to do that.
Is this a priority of your department to make sure that we're up and running when it comes to these threats?
It is. The FBI, maybe almost a third of its budget is national security matters. I asked them, was that enough some time ago, and I was told the right answer. And the answer was, well, we've got enough because we'll assign anybody doing anything to focus on terrorism. If it's a threat to us, it's our number one priority.
One of the tools they use to recruit out of theater, is the social media outlets like Facebook and other social media devices. They use it to actively recruit. I know you're aware of the recent dust-up with Cambridge Analytica, but terrorist organization using social media to recruit terrorism in our own backyard. Would you support Congress weighing in and trying to find some control over this?
Senator Graham, I think it's a growing, real problem. FBI has a great deal of insight into this program. We want to encourage them to be forthcoming about ideas to deal with the future, but you are correct. It needs more attention.
Congratulations on the Cloud Act. It really helps our ally, Great Britain, and your office was terrific. Thank you.
And Senator Graham was the number one advocate for that, which it was one of our top priorities in the Department of Justice, and without your help, it would not have passed.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, and welcome to your new position here. CJS, look forward to working with you and with Ranking Member Shaheen. And Mr. Attorney General, welcome. I enjoyed working with Senator Graham, and I'm glad we made progress on the Cloud Act. I do think it was an important step forward. I have 3 questions I'd like to ask, if I might. I think I'm the last man standing, so we'll work through them if we could, and then I think we're at the end.
As long as they occur within 5 minutes.
I will do my level
recognized.
First, as you know, Attorney General, my home community of Wilmington has faced some significant levels of gun violence, something the department has worked with us on in the past. And I've tried to find ways that we in the federal government can help local law enforcement confront this challenge. So I'm working with Senator Toomey of Pennsylvania. We have crafted and introduced a bill, the NICS Denial Notification Act, which recognizes that if someone who is a person prohibited, convicted felon, adjudicated mentally ill, convicted of domestic violence, goes into a gun shop, fills out their background check form, says, yes, I can buy a gun, and they're denied, that's information that would be helpful for local law enforcement to know. Would you agree that that's helpful for state and local law enforcement?
Yes, it could be.
There were 120,000 NICS denials last year. State of Pennsylvania, state of Virginia, they run it through, the state police run it. So they know when there's a NICS denial, and they have prosecuted hundreds of people. My home state, about 30 others, it's run independently of state law enforcement. All this bill would do is to require notification to state law enforcement when there is a denial of a NICS application. Do you think that would be a constructive step forward in terms of empowering state and local law enforcement to take timely action where a person prohibited is trying to get access to a weapon?
I would be pleased to review that. I'm aware that you were offering something of that nature, but I haven't studied it. I think it's got potential and would be pleased to do so. We also are directing our United States attorneys to prosecute more aggressively people who lie to get a gun. And some of those are caught on the, well, most of them are NICS denials are basically people who've lied.
That's right. These are lie and try offenses.
We call it the lie and try. That's correct.
Well, I look forward to working with you on that. One other thing I wanted to ask is about HIDA, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas Program under ONDCP. I worked hard to make sure Newcastle County, Delaware, which is our northernmost county, was included in the Philadelphia, Camden, HIDA area. And I'm concerned about changes you're proposing to the program that, as I understand it, would lead it to focus on enforcement activities, but not combating addiction. HIDA and other ONDCP programs have balanced enforcement with community efforts to try and fight addiction. Why reinvent the wheel when ONDCP, in my view, has been already providing needed assistance to communities across the country?
This has been a matter discussed for many years. We've been asked to reorganize the government to make it more effective. The HIDA investigative teams that are funded through this grant program have been a part of the ONDCP, the Office of Drug Control Policy. It was set up as a policy entity, and a little bit like the National Security Council that says we're spending all this money, let's make sure all these departments are doing it the right in a coordinated way. So we think that ONDCP needs to focus back on that, and that the actual management in the field of task forces that prosecute and investigate drug use is better coordinated with the DEA. But the HIDA officials, the people of the local communities that serve on the HIDA boards would be retained. The grant money would simply be managed by DEA, and I think it would create a closer working relationship.
I look forward to looking into that further. We may disagree on exactly how to manage it, but I agree with you. It's a long-standing debate. Let me close with just a few questions about the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District and the investigation of Michael Cohen. If I understood correctly your exchange with Senator Leahy earlier, I just want to make sure I understand. If you discover any connection between this investigation into Mr. Cohen and the ongoing investigation into allegations of Russian interference or anything related to the 2016 election, would you recuse yourself?
Yes.
Thank you. And have you discussed that investigation into Mr. Cohen with anyone outside of DOJ, including the president?
I don't think in any significant. Well, I'll just say this: the communications I might have to anyone in the White House, I believe, are the kind of communications that should not be revealed. I believe I have the right to and responsibility to maintain confidence in those. So I just am not able to go down that road.
So, in asserting executive privilege there, I'll move forward. Last question. Has the president or anyone in the administration discussed with you the possibility of President Trump pardoning Michael Cohen?
I am not able to reveal the contents of any communications I might have with the President of the United States or his top staff.
Well, given the previous conversation you had with Senator Van Hollen, it's my hope that if President Trump proceeded to pardon Michael Cohen in violation of longstanding policy, and did not consult with the pardon attorney, did not consult with DOJ, that you would express strong objection to that and would consider resigning if that step were taken. Hopefully it will not come to that. Thank you for the chance to question you today, and thank you for your service, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you, Senator Coons.
Attorney General, we're about to conclude our hearing. We're going to have a quick round. I was hoping that Senator Coons would lead before I indicated the potential of a second round. Senator Coons, anything you want to add to what you've questioned the Attorney General?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. No, I've completed my question.
Very good. I'll recognize Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on the issue that Senator Graham raised about Guantanamo, and he specifically mentioned the Beatles. On March the 5th, I sent the Justice Department a letter based on discussions that we have been having with families of the Americans who were killed, we think, by the Beatles, one of whom was a constituent of mine, James Foley, also included Stephen Sotloff and Kayla Mueller. And one of the things that we heard very strongly from the families of those Americans murdered by the terrorists, executed really, is that they wanted to see that the people who killed them were brought to justice. And they didn't feel like putting them in Guantanamo where no one would know and other terrorists would not be able to see that they were brought to justice and held accountable for their deeds was an appropriate way to deal with them. So I wonder if today you can tell me if you as the Attorney General and the Justice Department will advocate with this administration that those terrorists be brought to justice either in some international venue or in civilian courts in the United States.
Well, I believe I can say with certainty that they will be brought to justice. There has been a discussion. Senator Graham, for example, believes, and he's studied this for years, he's actually on his military duty, spent time at prisons in Afghanistan in places, so he's an expert, but he thinks the normal and best procedure is for people to be brought to Guantanamo where they're as prisoners of war, that they can be interrogated as normal prisoners of war. They're not provided attorneys and they're not set for trial and don't get discovery of the government. And then if a decision is made to bring them to the United States for trial or tried by military commission in Guantanamo, that's the best approach. I have advocated that with him when I was in the Senate. So that's my general view of it. We have had success trying a lot of these cases in federal court. Even though the rules of evidence are stricter, the discovery rules require the government to produce more evidence, sometimes could tend to reveal how they got caught and our techniques of catching them and our intelligence that way. So, but we are there's no dispute about these individuals being brought to trial. I have been disappointed, frankly, that the British, they were British citizens, they renounced their citizenship or rejected, had it pulled, but that they are not willing to try the cases, but tend to want to tell us how to try them. So, and they have certain evidence that we need. So it's a complex matter. We are spending a good deal of time on it. I believe you can say with confidence that we expect to have these individuals tried and held accountable for their horrific acts.
Well, thank you. And as you point out, we've been successful in federal court when we brought those terrorist cases before the court. And in fact, we've been more successful in civilian courts than we have in military tribunals. And I would urge you and the administration to take into account the wishes of the families who lost their loved ones because of those terrorists, and not provide another opportunity for terrorists to be able to use Guantanamo as a recruiting tool. So I certainly hope you will do that. I would like to change the subject now to, there have been a number of questions here relative to your recusal from issues relating to the 2016 presidential campaign and the work of Special Counselor Mueller. And I do have a couple of general questions that I hope you can answer, despite your recusal from questions regarding the Mueller investigation. Outside of misconduct, dereliction of duty, incapacity, conflict of interest, or other good cause, the conditions outlined in 28 CFR 600, can the Attorney General or his designee fire a special counsel?
Well, let me just say this. I expected somebody would press this, but I am recused from that matter, and there's one matter at stake, and I'm recused from that. So I believe it is not appropriate for me to opine or give my thoughts at this point, given the fact that I'm recused. So I appreciate your inquiry, but I think it is not appropriate for me to comment.
So will you also not comment on whether, in your legal view, the President can fire a special counsel appointed under the same regulation?
I feel the same way about that question.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I can just ask one more question. I know I'm over my time.
Please continue.
I want to go back to the census questions, because you have talked about, and there have been some questions about the citizenship question that is on to be included in the next census. Now, my understanding is that the last time this question was included in the census was in 1950. And so I have a question about why now the Justice Department feels like it needs to include that question. The answer that I've been given is that because it's used in enforcing the Voting Rights Act, but since we haven't used it since 1950, why is it necessary now? And does the Justice Department plan on using the information from the question for immigration enforcement?
Well, we submitted a written statement about that. The matter is under litigation today, and I am reluctant, and it really wouldn't be appropriate for me to discuss the merits and argue the pros and cons about it, if you'll forgive me on that. But we have a written document to the Census Bureau, and they are we are representing them in court.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator from Louisiana, Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, I think you're doing a wonderful job. I want to tell you that first.
Thank you.
You're a better man than I am. I can tell you, you've shown a lot of patience. You know, first they want you to recuse yourself, and then they want you to answer questions about it. You and I have talked about this before. You know, we are a nation of immigrants, which we're proud of. You know, I think we let in more folks from other countries into our country than any other nation. And I'm flattered that people want to come here. I mean, when's the last time you read about somebody trying to sneak into China? You know, they want to come here, and that's great. But we're a nation of laws, and we're not following our laws on immigration. Is there anything we can do about sanctuary cities in terms of legislation that would help you?
Absolutely. For example, I think we could authorize explicitly. I thought it was already sufficiently authorized, but you could explicitly authorize or pass legislation that mandates a cooperative relationship with state and local areas. Also,
I would have thought that'd be implicit. But
you know, Senator Kennedy, there's nothing like the improvement we've seen in law enforcement. You have in Louisiana, you've got cities, you've got parishes and cities and all these jurisdictions each have their borders and their jails, and we honor each other's holds and hold people till somebody can come over and pick them up because they got charges in another jurisdiction or another state or to the federal government. And this is an ideological, open borders, radical policy that a city or a county refuses after they've apprehended somebody who's entered the country unlawfully, who's committed perhaps a major crime. They refuse to honor the ICE officers when they come to pick them up. And that means the ICE officers have to go out in the community, place themselves and maybe neighbors at risk to try to apprehend sometimes dangerous criminals. And I cannot agree to that. I cannot accept having our officers placed at that kind of risk. And it's an important matter. It's not a little matter. And I think these cities need to reevaluate what they're saying. I don't think they know what they're saying. I don't think they understand the implications of their refusal to cooperate with brother and sister law officers like our ICE officers. We cooperate with them, and that's why we've been so, that's been a part of the 30-year decline in crime, is this partnership between federal and state officers. This is the biggest breach of that relationship I've seen in my 40 years of law enforcement.
Well, it just strikes me, I mean, we've talked a lot lately about the rule of law and the Mueller investigation, which I'm not going to ask you to comment on because you did correctly recuse yourself. We talked a lot about the rule of law, but it doesn't seem to apply when we talk about immigration laws. I mean, there are parts of immigration law I don't agree with, but I'm going to follow it, and I'm going to try to help my colleagues in federal, state, or local government to follow it until we change it, if we ever change it. And I just don't get it. I'm sorry, I don't. I mean, I understand the politics of it. But when you have the mayor of a city pick up the phone and, you know, tip off some folks who are in violation of federal law that they may be arrested, you know, the federal agents are coming in, I don't understand a world like that. I don't.
Well, if a person can cross the border on Monday and end up in San Francisco on Wednesday hauling dope and gets arrested with cocaine or heroin, why would not the city want the ICE, after they've served their time, to take them out of the country like the law contemplates? I find, like you, that's amazing. I also want to thank you.
We're spending billions and billions. I think I saw a figure of $36 billion. I'm sure that may be inaccurate. My memory's bad, but that we spend on border enforcement. But if you get through, and I'm sorry, in my state, if you can make it to New Orleans, you're home free. And I know our mayor disagrees with us on that, but it's an attitude. But anyway, if there's, I'll call you separately. I want to stay within my time, but thank you for your service.
Thank you, and thank you for being alert to this issue and helping us in raising it.
General Sessions, I think we're about to conclude. Let me ask just a couple of follow-up questions that I have. The department has requested funding for 75 new immigration judges and support staff to help alleviate the immigration court system backlog. As you would know, this committee provided funding for 100 additional immigration judges in the FY18 omnibus. Can you explain how these additions will enable the court to decrease that backlog and also speak to the expedited hearing process that the department has developed?
We've had a real problem for a number of years. In 2014, we only had 284 judges. With this funding, we believe we'll hit 559. That still may not be the optimum number, but it is a monumental improvement. We simply have more and more individuals who are making facial claims for asylum or other relief that justifies hearings, and it just is placing more and more stress on it. We have to be able to have prompt hearings, give people fair adjudication, and really they need to be held in custody until the hearing is over. Because when you release them from custody, because you can't bring them to speedy trial that they're entitled to, you can be ordered by the courts to release them, and they aren't coming back for trial. It's a loophole of monumental proportions, and there are a number of them, but that's one of the biggest. And more judges will, I can't tell you how appreciative we are to the Congress for doing that. It also helps the legitimate immigrant claimant to get his or her case heard promptly.
Well, General, I have a lot to learn in this new capacity. One of the surprises was to learn that the Executive Office of Immigration Review utilizes a management system that's based on paper. And your request includes $25 million to develop an electronic case management system. Can you tell us about how this will work and what a difference it will make?
We are looking to get more productivity and more legitimate and a better decision-making process from our judges, and we think that $25 million will pay for itself many times over, and we would appreciate that reform, and I believe it will help the system considerably.
Is this a one-time request, or there'll be requests for additional funding for this purpose in the future?
I think the initial cost will be the most significant. Whether we'll have the annual cost in the budget line item or not, I don't know. Probably so.
Are you aware of other places within your department in which you're still operating off of a paper-based system?
I think we're working to improve the ATF process by which firearms and their serial numbers are noted. That's not sufficiently computerized either. And it slows that down and costs money, we think, in the long run. So we'd like to be able to get a much quicker turnaround on that. And we're planning to improve that system also.
Let me ask finally about a spend plan. I look forward to receiving the department's spend plan. It's required by Section 532 of the CJS bill. As you know, several programs within the department, such as veteran courts and tribal assistant grants programs, received a significant increase. We talked a bit about that in the conversation that you had with one of my colleagues. They received a $14 million increase and $35 million increase, respectively. As we also indicated, there's a Fix, Nix, and Stop Act were passed in the omnibus bill, and which I hope will be outlined in your spend plan, how you intend to spend and implement those laws. And additionally, the Appropriations Committee included $3.3 billion to fight against opioid and prescription drug abuse crisis. Of this amount, $299.5 million was specifically included for the department to fund anti-opioid grant programs. Can you speak to the type of comprehensive planning and initiatives the department has undertaken to ensure these investments will have a maximum benefit?
I can. We're excited about that. I will share to you, Chairman and Ranking Member, we are determined to use that money quickly. We don't need New Hampshire waiting without having this deaths reduced. And we've got a series of ideas with DEA how to improve it, such as we can extend people from 57 to 60, age 60. If we just go through the normal hiring process, we may be 2 or 3 years before we get to the numbers that we are authorized to get to. So we could do that. We can take even people who've already retired, can work 20 hours a week. We're thinking about contracting with state and local police departments with people who've retired from them. So experienced narcotics officers, many of them highly trained and very experienced. We could contract with them. And the DEA has, at my request in meeting with Ron Patterson, and Ron Patterson, he's on top of it, we're going to have 400 added to task forces that we'll be able to fund that. So I guess we by May 7th, I believe is the date, we intend to have you a plan. Deputy Rosenstein and I have talked about it. Lee Loftus, our JMD leader, who's behind me and helping me, has been at this for many years. We're determined to try to meet that goal and have plans that we can use the money you've given us, and not 3 years from now, but now, because we face a crisis.
General, thank you. I had expected perhaps a more pro forma response to my question. And I'm pleased to see that you're moving with alacrity. That's a encouraging development. Let us know how we can be of help. We want to see the results when we authorize the spending.
Thank you.
I think. Oh, let me ask just this final question about that. On this opioid battle, how well can you assure me of the cooperation and coordination between the Department of Justice and other federal agencies in this battle?
Well, the President reached a bipartisan solution, I understand, to spend $6 billion additional dollars on the opioid crisis. That is a sizable increase, no doubt about it. We are getting only a small part of it. I don't know exactly what percentage, but it's certainly not the major. I expect that the prevention program, which I totally support, will be funded, but it doesn't need an unlimited amount of money. You can run a very good prevention program for a reasonable amount of money. And you've got treatment, which is very expensive, and I'm sure that will get more money. There'll be some research, and I'm talking about FDA, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health and Human Services, VA. All of them have roles to play, and others in the drug matters. And I would say you're entitled to keep an eye on all of us, and probably need to, because you run a massive department and you get some more money for a certain project, and the secretary has got a million challenges to deal with, and sometimes things don't get done with the alacrity we'd like to see.
We have a funding responsibility as a Congress. We have an oversight of equal value, in my view, and we need to do both better. General, thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. It's been a long afternoon, I'm sure, for you, but I appreciate the responses that you've given. I always ask, when I chair a hearing, the witnesses if they have anything they'd like to add for the record, something they want to correct, something they want to add, a question that they didn't feel like that they'd been asked that they'd like to answer. You may feel like you've been asked everything.
Well, I don't have much to add, except I would appreciate it if I have misspoken in any way. I'll try to correct that. And thank you, because really the 2018 appropriations was beneficial, and it provided us additional resources, and we are going to do our best to use them as you would like us to.
The General, thank you very much. If there are no further questions this afternoon, the senators may submit additional questions to the subcommittee's official for the subcommittee's official hearing record. We request the Department of Justice respond within 30 days. The subcommittee now stands adjourned.